The movie begins with a beach house built on the island, where we see a very good author named Ted. Ted lives here with his wife Marion and his daughter Ruth. The wall of their house is filled with pictures of their sons Tom and Tim. In fact, a few years ago, both of his sons had died in a car accident, and Marion could not bear the shock, and since then till now she has lived in depression. On the other hand, Ted is busy with his work, and Ruth is taken care of by her babysitter Alice. Ruth also comes to know about the accident of his brothers, and Ruth always looks at the pictures of her dead brothers. One day Ted hires an assistant for himself so that the assistant can do small tasks for him, and at the same time he can also do the work of a driver for him. Because Ted's driving license was cancelled 3 months ago. His name is Eddie. Then Ted tells Marion about Eddie, and then these two talk for a while. We get to know this by listening to their words. Since the death of his son, a lot of distance has increased in the relationship between them, and Marion, being in shock, doesn't say much. Now seeing his relationship in such a condition, Ted tells Marion that for some time we should get away from each other, and Marion agrees to it too, and goes to stay in a hotel in the city. On the same night, Ruth gets scared seeing a dream, and Ruth goes to Ted and tells him about her dream. Then Ted tells her a story and puts her to sleep, and then Ted starts writing a book about Ruth's dream. The next morning Marion goes to pick up Eddie because today, Eddie was about to start his assistant job. Then Eddie comes over and sees that instead of Ted, his wife has come to pick him up. Then when Eddie sees Marion, he finds her very beautiful, and he is also very attracted towards her. Marion drops Eddie at Ted's house and then goes to her hotel. Then Ted meets Eddie, and Ted tells him his work and tells him that he will have to live in this house from now on. Eddie admires Ted a lot, and Eddie wants to be a successful writer like Ted. That's why Eddie is very happy to be here, and Ted shows him the whole house. While doing so, he also tells him about his deteriorating marriage life. That's how Marion and he are living apart from each other. Then we also find out that Marion stays at Ted's home for 1 day so that Ruth can get the love of both the parents. After this, Eddie also meets Ruth's babysitter Alice. She was a very nice girl. Apart from writing Ted books, he also makes paintings. He always makes clothes, less paintings of girls, and Ted hires a girl named Evelyn to be his model. Then the next day Marion comes here, and Eddie also follows her to the theater. Eddie tells Marion that she had come here to have dinner because he does not give food from Ted at home. After hearing this, Marion tells him that one day, "I want to take you to dinner." That same night when Eddie comes back home, then he starts giving pleasure to himself after seeing Marion's photo. But then Ted and Ruth also come there, and Eddie narrowly escapes. The next day when Marion comes here, Eddie follows him to a beach, and then Eddie shuts up and sees Marion in a bikini. After this, he comes home and sees Marion's undergarments, and then he starts giving pleasure to himself. But then Marion comes home, and Marion sees Eddie doing this. Marion says sorry to Eddie, that he should have come by tip. Now Eddie was very ashamed of being caught like this, but Marion tells him that she is not angry with him, and at his age everyone does it. Then Eddie tells Marion that from the day he saw Marion, since then he thinks about her. Hearing this, Marion does not say anything and remains silent. The next day when Eddie drops Ted at Evelyn's house, then sees Eddie, that Marion herself has left her underwear there for her. Then that evening, Marion goes to dinner with Eddie, and they talk a lot. Marion asks Eddie, "That's why you don't take Alice on a date?" To which Eddie says that Alice is not interested in him. Now after talking like this for a long time, both come home. The next day Marion comes to Eddie's room, and then she tells Eddie the story behind all the photos in the walls. Now telling this, Marion seduces Eddie, and then they both get intimate. The next day Ted goes to a place with Eddie, where Ted reads its book to 10 people. Eddie learns after hearing Ted's story that Ted writes all his books on his own life. After that, when he is coming home, then Ted thanks Eddie. Since Eddie came here, Marion has started being happy after a long time. Now a few days later, one night, Ruth comes to Marion's room, and Ruth sees Eddie and Marion getting intimate. Seeing this, Ruth starts crying, and then Marion calms her down. Now Ted also gets to know about this affair, and then Ted talks to Eddie about it in the car the next day. Ted tells him, "That's what I want when Marion and I have a divorce, that you testify on my behalf against Marion and tell about your offer so that I could get Ruth's custody." Now after hearing all this, Eddie asks Marion, that's why he's still with Ted, to which Marion tells that Ted is a very good father, and he also takes good care of Ruth. And Marion tells this too, that he hates Ted's painting habit too much, and initially he used to make nude pictures of Marion too. Now some days go by like this, And one night Eddie asks Marion how their children had an accident. After hearing this, Marion again remembers her dead sons, and then she doesn't say anything. On the same night that Eddie was showing all the pictures to Ruth, Ruth then asks to take a picture to her room, and Marion agrees to it. But Ruth drops that picture, and her finger is cut by the broken glass. Eddie and Marion take him to the doctor, and then when Ted comes to know about it, then Ted scolds Eddie a lot. That's why he had given the picture to Ruth, while this work belonged to Marion. At night, Ruth again starts crying after having a scary dream. Her Ted tries to calm her down enough, but she doesn't calm down. After this, Marion comes there, and then she pacifies Ruth. Seeing this, Ted realizes that after the divorce, Ruth should stay with Marion because Ruth will be happy there. The next day, while Marion is getting intimate with Eddie, Marion suddenly starts crying, and then she explains that she is going to leave all this soon and go somewhere. That same day, Ted hires Eddie to go to Evelyn's house and return all her paintings because now Ted's mind was filled with Evelyn. When Eddie goes to Evelyn's house, so knowing this, Evelyn gets very angry and tells Eddie that Ted will have to come to meet him on Friday. But meanwhile, Evelyn accidentally blocks the door of her house, and then Eddie breaks into the window of her house and goes inside. In the evening, Marion tells Eddie that on Friday you will go to drop Ted at Evelyn's house, but will not bring it back. By doing this, it will be evening for Ted come home by himself. In such a time, taking all the pictures of my sons, I will go away from here forever. And then the next day, when Eddie takes Ted to Evelyn's house, Evelyn is very angry. She tore away all the paintings sent by Ted, and then Eddie leaves Ted at Evelyn's house and comes back home. Marion then sends Ruth to see the doctor with Eddie, because if Ruth is here, then she will not be able to leave from here. On the other hand, Evelyn follows Ted's life, and Evelyn also tries to crush Ted with her car, but Ted runs near the beach. Here Eddie goes to the picture shop after getting Ruth's stitch removed, or he was given to repair that broken picture. After going there, Eddie asks her for that picture today, because he knew that when Ruth would reach home, she would go mad for not seeing her mother in the picture. But when Eddie asks for that picture, so the manager here refuses to give Eddie the picture, on which Eddie writes to them and explains the whole thing. He also tells them about his and Marion's affair, and the manager, after hearing all this, she also gives the picture. On the other hand, Ted runs to a bookshop, or he gets many fans, and starts giving them his autograph. Here Ted's eyes go on to young girls, who are his big fan, asks them whether she can drop him at his house. Both the girls take him to their house first, where Ted changes his clothes. After this, Ted tells the girls and their mother that he wants to paint her, and for this they all happily agree. After this, with the help of Ted's girls, he comes home early, and coming home early, he sees Marion leaving. Then Ted turns to her, but nothing speaks to her, and Marion moves from here to New York forever. After some time, Eddie comes here with Ruth. Ted is very angry at Eddie, and then slaps him, but instead hits Eddie with a punch in the nose, because Marion told him to do so. Eddie tells Ted that Marion is now gone somewhere forever. Along with this, all the pictures of Marion's sons have also been taken, and now Ted has no pictures of his sons left. Now that Ted comes to know about all this, then he fires Eddie from the job, and only tomorrow asks him to leave from here. After Marion's departure, it became very difficult to handle Ruth, and so her babysitter Alice also left the job. Now Ted is very sad because of all this, and tells Eddie in the evening that's how their children had an accident. Actually, that night, these people had gone to skin, and Marion, Ted, and his two sons were drunk because of the drink. The other son was driving at that time, who did not even have much driving experience. There was snow on the headlight and backlight of the car, like Ted forgot to clean. Due to not seeing the car, a truck collided with his car on the highway, in which both his sons were killed. To ease the suffering, she gave birth to Ruth, but that didn't change anything. Now Eddie feels very bad after hearing this story, but he did not understand this. How can a mother leave her daughter? Now the next day, Evelyn's servant comes to meet Ted and tells him now that Evelyn has fired her from her job. Hearing this, Ted hires him as a driver and puts his wife on the job of cook and Ruth's babysitter here. After this, Annie goes back to his house after saying goodbye to Ted. Evelyn's servant and his wife have started taking good care of Ruth, and this movie ends here. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like. It really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.